Homeless girl with baby begs young millionaire for shelter in a snowstorm. His shocking demand left everyone speechless. Tonight, you're about to witness a story that will shake you to your core. A tale of a desperate homeless girl, a heartless millionaire, and a demand so shocking it will leave you questioning everything you think you know about human nature. But before we dive into this incredible journey, hello my amazing viewers. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you're watching from. Are you cozy at home? Maybe grabbing a quick break at work? Or perhaps you're watching from somewhere completely unexpected? Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're joining me today. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do me a huge favor and smash it right now, because stories like this one are exactly why this channel exists. To bring you the most gripping, emotional, and life-changing tales that will stay with you long after you finish watching. The iron gates clanged against their hinges as tiny fists pounded desperately against the metal, each strike growing weaker than the last. Through the blizzard's howling fury, a small figure collapsed against the towering entrance to the Worthington estate, her breath forming crystalline clouds that disappeared into the merciless night. Hermione Beaumont's fingers had turned blue hours ago, but she couldn't feel them anymore. Nothing existed except the weight of the infant in her arms, and the knowledge that if these gates didn't open soon, little Luna Mills would never see another sunrise. The baby's lips had gone from pink to pale to a terrifying shade of gray, and her tiny chest barely rose and fell beneath the threadbare blanket that had been their only protection against winter's cruelest assault. "Please," Hermione whispered to the fortress of warm light beyond the gates, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Please, someone help us." Inside the mansion, Sebastian Worthington stood at his office window, watching the pathetic scene unfold. At 28, he commanded a business empire worth $300 million, owned properties on 4 continents, and could buy anything his heart desired. Yet as he observed the dying girl and infant at his gates, something twisted in his chest, something he'd spent years burying beneath layers of calculated indifference. His butler, Heinrich, appeared in the doorway with practiced silence. "Sir, there's a situation at the front gates." "I can see that." Sebastian's voice carried the cold precision that had made him legendary in boardrooms across Manhattan. "What do you suggest we do about it?" Heinrich shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should call emergency services?" "The child appears to be." "No." The word cut through the air like a blade. Sebastian turned from the window, his steel-gray eyes reflecting none of the warmth from the fireplace crackling behind him. "I have a different idea." Outside, Hermione's knees finally gave way. She sank into the snow, pulling Luna closer to her chest, trying to share what little body heat remained between them. The baby hadn't cried in over an hour, a silence more terrifying than any scream. Through her blurred vision, she saw lights moving inside the mansion, shadows behind expensive curtains, the outline of a life she could never touch. The front door of the estate opened with a creak that seemed to echo through the storm. Sebastian emerged, his designer coat pristine against the chaos of the night, flanked by 2 members of his security team. He approached the gates with measured steps, his expression unreadable as he took in the sight of the 2 children fighting for their lives just feet away. "You want shelter?" he called out, his voice carrying easily over the wind. Hermione's head snapped up, hope flooding her features despite the exhaustion threatening to claim her. "Yes, please, my sister. She's just a baby she needs." "I'll give you what you want," Sebastian interrupted, his tone businesslike and detached. "But I have one condition." The security guards exchanged glances. Heinrich, who had followed his employer outside, felt his stomach drop as he recognized the look in Sebastian's eyes. The same look he'd worn during hostile takeovers, during moments when mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford. Hermione struggled to her feet, swaying dangerously as she cradled Luna. "Anything," she gasped. "I'll do anything." Sebastian's lips curved into something that might have been called a smile, but held no warmth whatsoever. The words that came next would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. Words so cruel and unexpected that they would spread through the household staff like wildfire, cementing Sebastian Worthington's reputation as the most heartless man in the city. "You can have shelter," he said, his voice carrying across the snowy wasteland with terrifying clarity. "But only if you leave the baby outside." The world seemed to stop. Even the wind held its breath as the magnitude of his demand settled over the group like a death shroud. Heinrich's face went white with shock. The security guards took involuntary steps backward, as if distance could separate them from the horror of what they'd just heard. But it was Hermione's expression that would be burned into Sebastian's memory forever. The way hope died in her eyes, replaced by a devastation so complete it seemed to age her 10 years in a single moment. "What?" she whispered, the word barely forming on her frozen lips. "You heard me," Sebastian continued, his voice never wavering from its business-like tone. "I'll provide you with food, warmth, and shelter, but the infant stays outside. Those are my terms." What happened next would change everything, not just for a homeless girl and her dying sister, but for a man who thought he had buried his humanity so deep that nothing could ever reach it again. Because sometimes the most shocking demands aren't born from cruelty at all. The truth behind Sebastian's words was about to shatter every assumption anyone had ever made about the young millionaire, and reveal a secret that would transform this night of desperation into something none of them could have ever imagined. How do you think this incredible story will unfold? What could possibly drive someone to make such a heartless demand? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how this emotional roller coaster concludes. Trust me, you're going to want to see what happens next. The silence that followed Sebastian's demand stretched like a chasm between mercy and madness. Heinrich had served the Worthington family for 37 years, had watched Sebastian grow from a bright-eyed boy who gave away his allowance to street musicians into the calculating businessman who now stood unmoved before a dying infant. This wasn't the same person. "Sir," Heinrich whispered, his voice trembling with decades of suppressed emotion, "perhaps we should reconsider. My decision is final." Sebastian's words cut through the night air like shards of ice. Yet for the briefest moment, Heinrich caught something else in his employer's eyes, a flicker of something that looked dangerously close to pain. Inside the mansion, Dr. Emma Stone was finishing her weekly medical consultation for Sebastian's elderly neighbor when her phone buzzed with an urgent text from Heinrich. "Medical. Emergency at front gates. Come immediately." As the estate's on-call physician and Sebastian's childhood friend, Emma had seen him at his worst and his best, but she had never seen him like this. She rushed outside, her medical bag in hand, stopping short when she witnessed the scene unfolding before her. The homeless girl, barely more than a child herself, was shaking uncontrollably, whether from cold or shock. Emma couldn't tell. The infant in her arms had gone silent, a terrifying sign that Emma recognized immediately. "Sebastian, what the hell is wrong with you?" Emma's voice carried the authority of someone who had known him since they were both 7 years old, running through these same gardens during summer afternoons that felt like a lifetime ago. "That baby needs immediate medical attention." "Then you're welcome to treat her," Sebastian replied without turning around. Outside the gates, Emma stared at him in disbelief. This was the same man who had anonymously funded an entire children's wing at the local hospital. The same person who had paid for her medical school when her family lost everything in the 2008 financial crisis. The same broken boy who had once sobbed in her arms after. She stopped that thought before it could fully form. Some memories were too dangerous to revisit, especially now. "Hermione, isn't it?" Sebastian addressed the girl directly, his voice taking on an almost conversational tone that somehow made his cruelty even more chilling. "That's what you told my security guard when you first arrived 3 hours ago." 3 hours. The words hit everyone like a physical blow. He had been watching this child slowly freeze to death for 3 hours before making his appearance. "You've been living in the abandoned Pembroke building downtown," Sebastian continued, as if he were discussing the weather. "Apartment 4B, specifically. The one with the broken window that you've covered with cardboard and duct tape." Very resourceful. Hermione's eyes widened in terror. How could he possibly know that? "You lost your job at the diner 2 weeks ago when they discovered you were underage and using false identification. Your sister Luna is actually your cousin, left in your care when your aunt disappeared 6 months ago." Sebastian's voice remained maddeningly calm as he recited facts that should have been impossible for him to know. "You've been surviving on whatever you could find in dumpsters behind restaurants, and last Tuesday, you stole a loaf of bread from Morrison's corner store, though you left an IOU note, which I found touching." Dr. Stone felt her blood run cold. This level of detailed surveillance wasn't just unusual, it was obsessive. Sebastian, how do you know all this? For the first time since emerging from a mansion, Sebastian's composure cracked. His jaw tightened, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made everyone present take a step back. Because I've been looking for her. The admission hung in the air like a thunderclap. Heinrich's eyes widened in recognition. He remembered now. The sleepless nights, the private investigators, the way Sebastian had thrown himself into work with a desperate intensity that bordered on self-destruction. Looking for her, Emma's medical training kicked in as she studied her oldest friend's face. The dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled almost imperceptibly, the careful control that barely masked something much more volatile underneath. Sebastian, what aren't you telling us? But Sebastian had already turned his attention back to Hermione, who was now staring at him with a mixture of fear and confusion that broke something fundamental in Heinrich's chest. Tell me, Hermione, Sebastian said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Do you remember anything about your life before the age of 5? The question hit like a physical blow. Hermione's face went white, whiter than the snow falling around them. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping Luna in the process. What? How could you? The house fire on Maple Street, 15 years ago, Sebastian continued relentlessly. 2 families destroyed, multiple casualties, but some survivors were never accounted for. His voice grew rougher with each word, as if he were dragging them up from some deep, painful place. A little girl, approximately 3 years old, found wandering the streets 3 days later. No identification, no family to claim her. She was placed in the system and promptly lost. Dr. Stone felt the pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. The obsessive research, the years of guilt, the way Sebastian had thrown money at every children's charity in the city while maintaining an emotional distance that she'd never understood. The fire, she whispered. Oh my God, Sebastian, the fire. Heinrich closed his eyes, remembering that terrible night 15 years ago. The phone calls, the sirens, the way 12-year-old Sebastian had screamed and fought against the paramedics who were trying to treat his burns. The way he had insisted, through tears and smoke inhalation, that there had been another child in the house, a little girl he had tried to save but couldn't reach. Everyone had told him he was in shock, that the trauma had confused his memories. But Sebastian had never stopped believing, never stopped searching. You were in the house, Sebastian said to Hermione, his voice now raw with 15 years of suppressed pain. The night my family died. The night I failed to save you. The words hit Hermione like a sledgehammer to the chest. Images flashed through her mind, fragments she had always dismissed as nightmares. Smoke and flames, and a boy's voice calling out to her through the darkness. Arms reaching for her through burning doorways. The sound of someone screaming her name as the world collapsed around her. No, she whispered, shaking her head violently. No, that's not. I don't remember. You had a stuffed rabbit, Sebastian pressed on, his careful control finally beginning to crumble. Pink velvet with one ear missing. You called her Rosie, and you wouldn't go anywhere without her. Hermione's knees gave out completely. She sank into the snow, clutching Luna so tightly the baby finally let out a weak cry, the first sound she had made in hours. The cry seemed to break whatever spell had been holding the group frozen in place. Enough. Dr. Stone stepped forward, her medical instincts overriding everything else. I don't care what twisted logic is driving this reunion, but that baby is going into hypothermic shock, and if we don't get her inside in the next 5 minutes, she's going to die. Sebastian's eyes snapped to the infant in Hermione's arms, and for one terrible moment, Emma saw the 12-year-old boy who had lost everything in a single night. The boy who had spent 15 years believing he was a failure, a coward, someone who couldn't protect the people who mattered most. My offer stands, he said quietly, but the words seemed to cost him everything. Shelter for you. The baby stays outside. It was Heinrich who finally understood. Heinrich who had raised Sebastian after the fire, who had watched him build walls around his heart so high that nothing could ever hurt him again, who knew that sometimes the cruelest acts came from the deepest love. Because Sebastian Worthington wasn't trying to save just anyone tonight. He was trying to save the ghost that had haunted him for 15 years. the little girl he had failed to protect when it mattered most. And if his shocking demands seemed heartless to everyone watching, it was because they didn't understand the impossible choice he was really making. Sometimes salvation came disguised as cruelty, and sometimes the only way to save someone was to break your own heart in the process. What none of them realized was that this was only the beginning. The real shock, the truth that would change everything, was still coming. What do you think about Sebastian's revelation? Could you have imagined this connection between them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love reading your theories about where these stories are heading. And if you're as invested in this tale as I am, make sure you're subscribed because the next part is going to completely flip everything you think you know. Dr. Stone was already moving toward Hermione when Sebastian's voice cut through the storm like a blade. "Emma, stop." The command carried such authority that she froze mid-step, her medical bag halfway to the ground. But it was the tone underneath, desperate, almost pleading, that made her actually listen. "If you take another step toward those gates," Sebastian continued, his eyes never leaving Hermione's face, "you'll trigger the motion sensors." Heinrich felt his blood turn to ice. "Sir, the security system was deactivated for your arrival." "Not that security system." Sebastian's words came out sharp and clipped. "The other one. The one that's been watching this property for the past 6 months." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as the implications of Sebastian's statement sank in. Emma stared at her childhood friend in horror. "What other security system?" "Sebastian, what the hell is going on?" For the first time since emerging from the mansion, Sebastian's carefully constructed facade began to crack. His hands were shaking now, not from the cold, but from something much more dangerous. "Tell me, Hermione," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "who told you to come here tonight?" Hermione looked up from where she knelt in the snow, confusion and fear warring across her features. "No one told me. I was desperate. I saw the lights. I thought maybe—" "Wrong answer." Sebastian pulled out his phone, and Emma caught a glimpse of what looked like a surveillance app with multiple red dots moving across a map. "Because according to my security feed, you've been circling this property for 3 days. And 20 minutes before you collapsed at my gates, a black sedan with tinted windows dropped you off 2 blocks away." The color drained from Hermione's face. "That's not. I walked here. I've been walking for hours." "You're not lying," Sebastian said quietly. "Which means you don't remember. Which means they drugged you again." Again. The word hit the group like a physical blow. Heinrich stepped forward, his years of loyal service giving him the courage to ask the question everyone was thinking. "Sir, who is they?" Sebastian's laugh was bitter and devoid of any humor. "The same people who set the fire 15 years ago. The same people who have been using Hermione as bait for the past 6 months, trying to draw me out. The same people who planted a tracking device in that baby's blanket." Emma felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "A tracking device? Sebastian, that's insane." "Is it?" Sebastian held up his phone, and the screen showed a pulsing red that corresponded exactly to Luna's location in Hermione's arms. "Run a scan, Emma. Check the baby's blanket. Tell me I'm crazy." With trembling hands, Dr. Stone pulled a small device from her medical bag, a scanner she used to detect foreign objects in patients. She aimed it at the infant in Hermione's arms, and the device immediately began beeping frantically. "Lower left corner of the blanket," Sebastian said wearily. "Sewn into the hem. They wanted me to find it eventually. They're not trying to hide anymore." Hermione stared down at Luna in horror, then back up at Sebastian. "I don't understand. Who would do this? Why would anyone?" "Because they want me to bring you inside," Sebastian interrupted. "They want me to do exactly what every instinct is screaming at me to do. Unlock those gates, let you both in, and finally reunite with the girl I failed to save 15 years ago." His voice cracked. "They're counting on my guilt. My need to fix what I couldn't fix before." Heinrich's eyes widened with understanding. "The mansion's security grid. If someone enters with an active tracking device, every system in the house goes down," Sebastian finished. "Alarms, cameras, reinforced doors, everything. The place becomes completely vulnerable for exactly 4 minutes while the backup systems engage. Long enough for a small team to breach the perimeter and—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Dr. Stone felt sick. "This is about the Beaumont investigation, isn't it? The pharmaceutical money your family was going to expose before the fire." Sebastian nodded grimly. My father was 3 days away from revealing how Beaumont Industries had been testing experimental drugs on foster children, using kids from the system who had no one to protect them, no one to ask questions when they disappeared. Hermione's face went white. Beaumont. That's my last name. But I don't remember. Because they made sure you wouldn't, Sebastian said gently. You were one of their test subjects, Hermione. A 3-year-old whose memory they systematically destroyed with experimental drugs. When my father found out, when he tried to save you and the other children, they burned down your house, Emma whispered in horror, with my entire family inside, and they made it look like an accident. Sebastian's voice was steady now, but Emma could see the rage burning behind his eyes. 15 years of suppressed fury, finally finding its target. I've spent every day since then building evidence, finding survivors, preparing to finish where my father started. And they know I'm close. Heinrich stepped forward, his elderly frame trembling with more than just cold. Which is why tonight feels like a trap. It is a trap, Sebastian confirmed. But not the kind they think they're setting. Because they made one crucial mistake. He looked directly at Hermione, and for the first time since this nightmare began, his expression softened. They assumed I would choose my heart over my head. They assumed that seeing you again, finding the one person I've spent 15 years searching for, would make me stupid. So your demand, Emma said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn, to leave the baby outside, is the only way to save them both. Sebastian pulled out a second device, this one larger and more sophisticated. This is a signal jammer. The moment I activate it, their tracking device goes dead, and their assault team loses their window to attack. But it only works if the device stays outside the mansion's electromagnetic field. Hermione stared at him in disbelief. You want me to leave Luna out here die, just so your security system stays intact? No, Sebastian said quietly. I want you to trust me long enough to understand that I'm about to do something far more dangerous than letting you inside. He began walking toward the gates, his fingers working quickly on his phone. Heinrich, prepare the medical bay. Emma, I need you to have your trauma kit ready. And Hermione, he stopped at the gates, his hand on the electronic lock. I need you to know that what I'm about to do goes against every tactical advantage I have. But 15 years ago, I failed to save you. I won't make that mistake again. The gates began to swing open. Emma grabbed his arm in panic. Sebastian, if you're right about the tracking device, then we have exactly 4 minutes before they breach the house, he said calmly. 4 minutes to get you both to safety, remove the device, and prepare for a war that's been 15 years in the making. He stepped outside the gates for the first time, kneeling in the snow beside Hermione. Up close, she could see the scars on his hands from the fire, the way his eyes carried a pain that matched her own forgotten trauma. The baby comes inside, he said softly, reaching for Luna. You come inside. The tracking device stays here, and in about 3 minutes, this entire property is going to become a battlefield. But for the first time in 15 years, we're going to be on the right side of it. As he lifted Luna into his arms, the infant's eyes opened for the first time all night. And in that moment, looking down at the tiny face that had been used as a weapon against them both, Sebastian made a promise that would change everything. They used you to try to destroy me, he whispered to the baby. But instead, you're going to help me save the person they stole from both of us. The tracking device hit the snow with a soft thud. In the distance, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the storm. And the 4-minute countdown of war had just begun. I'm literally on the edge of my seat writing this. Did you see that twist coming? Sebastian isn't the villain at all. He's been protecting Hermione this entire time. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen in the next 4 minutes. And if you're loving this story as much as I am, smash that subscribe button because it's about to get absolutely wild. The massive oak doors of the Worthington mansion slammed shut behind them with a finality that seemed to echo through Sebastian's soul. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. That's how long they had before hell arrived at their doorstep. Medical bay now, Sebastian commanded, his arms still cradling Luna as he moved through the foyer with practiced efficiency. But it was the way Hermione's hand instinctively reached out to steady herself against his shoulder that made his step falter. Even through the thick wool of his coat, her touch sent an electric shock through his system, a recognition that went deeper than memory, deeper than logic. The baby's hypothermic, Dr. Stone called out, her medical bag already open as they rushed toward the mansion's private medical facility. Core temperature is dangerously low, and I'm seeing signs of frostbite on her extremities. Heinrich was ahead of them, his elderly legs moving faster than they had in years as he unlocked the medical bay's reinforced doors. "Sir, I've activated the house's defense protocols. All windows are now reinforced, and the panic room is prepared if..." "We're not running," Sebastian cut him off, gently transferring Luna to the heated examination table that Dr. Stone had prepared. "Not this time." As Emma worked to stabilize the infant, Sebastian turned to find Hermione staring at her surroundings with an expression of profound confusion. The medical bay was state-of-the-art, equipped better than most hospitals, but it was the personal touches that had caught her attention. Children's books on the shelves, stuffed animals in every corner, and dozens of photographs covering one entire wall. Photographs of missing children, all of them connected to the Beaumont Industries conspiracy. "You've been looking for them too," Hermione whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of a photo, showing a young boy with eyes that held too much pain for his age. "All these children." 43 confirmed victims over the past 15 years, Sebastian said quietly, his voice thick with barely controlled emotion. Most of them disappeared from the foster system. No one to ask questions, no one to report them missing. Beaumont Industries used them like lab rats. Hermione's hand stopped on a photograph that made her breath catch. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, with the same bone structure as her own, the same dark eyes. The nameplate beneath read, Aria Beaumont, missing since 2018. "This girl," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She looks like you," Sebastian finished. "Because she's your sister. Your real sister." The words hit Hermione like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, and Sebastian was there instantly, his hands steadying her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the man who had made his cruel demand at the gates just minutes before. "I don't understand," she said, looking up into his eyes that seemed to hold answers to questions she didn't even know how to ask. "If she's my sister, then why do I have her last name? Why am I Hermione Beaumont if..." "Because that's not your real name," Sebastian said gently. "Your birth name was Hermione Chase. Beaumont Industries took you when you were 3, erased your identity, and gave you the name of their founder as some kind of sick joke. They wanted you to carry the legacy of the man who destroyed your life." Emma looked up from her work with Luna, catching the way Sebastian's voice changed when he spoke to Hermione. Softer, more vulnerable, stripped of the corporate armor he wore like a second skin. "Sebastian, how do you know all this?" "Because I've been tracking every child they took, following every paper trail, building a case that's taken me 15 years to complete." Sebastian moved to a secure computer terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "But I couldn't find you, Hermione. You were the only one who completely disappeared from their records. Until 6 months ago." The screen lit up with files, documents, and surveillance footage that made Hermione's head spin. But it was the video feed from the abandoned Pembroke building that made her heart stop. "You've been watching me," she said, her voice a mixture of betrayal and something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Protecting you," Sebastian corrected. "The same night I finally tracked you to that building, Beaumont's cleanup crew showed up. They weren't there to recapture you, Hermione. They were there to eliminate you." He pulled up another video feed, this one showing dark figures moving through the building's lower floors with military precision. They've been systematically killing every survivor who might testify against them. You were next on their list. Heinrich's voice crackled over the intercom, interrupting the revelation. "Sir, we have vehicles approaching from 3 directions. Estimated arrival in 90 seconds. Sebastian's jaw tightened, but he kept his focus on Hermione. "I've been manipulating their intel for months, feeding them false information about your location, buying us time to gather evidence. But tonight they forced my hand." "The tracking device in Luna's blanket," Hermione said, understanding beginning to dawn. "You knew it was there. I put it there." The admission seemed to cost Sebastian everything. 3 days ago, when you took Luna to the free clinic on 5th Street, I needed them to think they had the advantage, needed them to believe they were controlling the situation. Emma's hands stilled on her medical equipment. "You used a baby as bait. I used a tracking device as bait," Sebastian corrected sharply. "Luna was never in danger. I've had a protection detail on them both for weeks." Protection detail? Hermione's voice rose. I've been starving, freezing, watching Luna get sicker every day, and you had people watching us. People who kept you alive. Sebastian shot back, his own emotions finally breaking through. Do you think it was a coincidence that the diner manager forgot to check your ID for 3 months? That the Morrison security cameras malfunctioned every time you took food? That the Pembroke building's heat somehow kept working despite being condemned? The truth hit Hermione like a tidal wave. Every small mercy, every stroke of luck that had kept them alive over the past months, none of it had been chance. You've been taking care of us, she whispered. I've been failing to take care of you, Sebastian corrected, his voice raw with 15 years of guilt. Just like I failed 15 years ago. Just like. His words were cut off by the sound of glass shattering somewhere in the mansion's upper floors. They're inside. Heinrich's voice came through the intercom, tight with fear. South wing, 2nd floor. Multiple entry points. Sebastian was already moving, pulling weapons from a concealed panel in the medical bay's wall. Emma, keep Luna stabilized. Heinrich, lock down this floor and prepare for. No. Hermione's voice stopped him cold. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You're staying here where it's safe. Safe. Hermione laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sebastian, I've been running from these people my entire life. They stole my memories. They killed my family. They turned me into a ghost. I'm done hiding. She moved toward him, and Sebastian was struck by how different she looked now. Not the broken, desperate girl from the gates, but someone awakening to her own strength. When she placed her hand on his arm, he felt that same electric shock, but stronger now, more purposeful. For 15 years, you've carried the guilt of not saving me, she said quietly. But maybe it's time to let me save myself. Emma looked up from Luna, who was finally showing signs of improvement. The baby's stable, she announced, but she needs constant monitoring for the next few hours. Then you stay with her, Hermione said to Emma, never taking her eyes off Sebastian. And we go end this. Heinrich's voice crackled through the intercom again, more urgent now. Sir, they've breached the main stairwell. Whatever you're going to do, we're going to give them exactly what they came for, Sebastian said, making a decision that went against every protective instinct he possessed. He handed Hermione a weapon, their fingers brushing as she took it. They want to use her connection against us? Fine. Let's show them what 15 years of rage can accomplish when it finally finds the right target. As they moved toward the door, Hermione caught Sebastian's arm one last time. Before we do this, she said, I need you to know something. He turned to face her, and in that moment, with danger closing in around them and the weight of their shared tragedy heavy in the air, something shifted between them. Something that had been building since the moment he first saw her through the storm. I may not remember everything about that night, she said softly, but I remember you. I remember a boy's voice in the darkness, promising he would find me. And somewhere in the deepest part of my mind, I've been waiting 15 years for that promise to come true. The words hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. And for one perfect moment, before the war that had been building for 15 years finally exploded around them, Sebastian allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, some promises were worth keeping no matter how long it took. The sound of footsteps in a hallway outside shattered the moment. It was time to face the demons that had haunted them both for far too long. The chemistry between Sebastian and Hermione is absolutely electric. I can't believe how their connection is developing under such intense circumstances. What do you think is going to happen when they finally confront the people who destroyed their lives? Drop your predictions in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed because this story is building to something absolutely incredible. The corridor outside the medical bay stretched into darkness, broken only by emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows on the mansion's ornate walls. Sebastian moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment, while Hermione matched his pace with an instinctive grace that surprised them both. Left corridor leads to the main staircase, Sebastian whispered, his breath warm against her ear as they pressed against the wall. They'll expect us to. The sound of Heinrich's voice, calm and measured, drifted down from the floor above. But he wasn't speaking to them. Yes, they're both armed now, Heinrich said quietly into what must have been a radio. 2nd floor, moving toward your position. The girl doesn't remember the conditioning protocols, so she may be unpredictable. Sebastian's blood turned to ice. 15 years of trust, 15 years of believing Heinrich was the only family he had left, crumbled in an instant. Hermione saw the devastation cross his features and instinctively reached for his hand. Sebastian, he's been working for them, Sebastian whispered, his voice hollow with betrayal. All this time, Heinrich has been not working for them. Heinrich's voice came from directly behind them, causing both Sebastian and Hermione to spin around. The elderly butler stood in the shadows, his kind eyes filled with tears, a small device in his trembling hands. Working to protect you. Both of you. Sebastian's weapon was trained on the man who had raised him before Heinrich had finished speaking. Explain. Now. The night of the fire, Heinrich began, his voice shaking with emotion. Your father didn't just discover Beaumont's experiments on foster children. He discovered something else. Something that would have destroyed their entire operation. Hermione felt her grip on reality starting to slip. What else? Heinrich's eyes moved to the medical bay behind them, where Dr. Stone was caring for Luna. He discovered that they had taken his own daughter. Your sister, Sebastian. Your baby sister who was supposed to have died in her crib that night. The world stopped. Sebastian's weapon wavered as the words hit him, like physical blows. That's impossible, he whispered. Isabella died in the fire. I saw her room. You saw what they wanted you to see, Heinrich said gently. Isabella was taken 3 days before the fire. Beaumont Industries needed a newborn for their most dangerous experiments, testing memory suppression drugs on developing brains. Your father found out, and that's why they had to silence him. Hermione's mind was reeling. Luna, she breathed. You're saying Luna is Sebastian's sister, Heinrich confirmed. Isabella Worthington, now 18 months old, when she should be 15 years old. The memory suppression drugs didn't just erase her past. They reversed her physical development, trapping her in an endless loop of infancy. Sebastian staggered backward as if he'd been shot. The weapon fell from his nerveless fingers as the magnitude of the revelation crashed over him. I've been searching for Hermione for 15 years, he said in a voice barely above a whisper. But I should have been searching for Isabella. You were searching for both, Heinrich said softly. Beaumont Industries kept them together intentionally. Hermione was Isabella's primary caretaker in their facility. They bonded her to the baby to ensure cooperation. When Hermione escaped 6 months ago, she instinctively took Isabella with her. Dr. Stone's voice crackled through the intercom, urgent and confused. Sebastian, you need to get back here. Now, the baby's blood work is showing something impossible. Hermione was already moving, her protective instincts overriding everything else. What's wrong with her? Her DNA. Emma's voice came through the speakers, filled with scientific bewilderment. It's showing rapid cellular regeneration, advanced neurological activity way beyond normal infant parameters. And, Sebastian, this child's genetic marker suggests she's aging backward. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Luna, Isabella, wasn't just a victim of Beaumont's experiments. She was their greatest success and their most dangerous failure. The memory suppression drug was supposed to create compliant subjects, Heinrich explained as they rushed back toward the medical bay. But in Isabella's case, it created something unprecedented, a consciousness that could reset itself indefinitely, immune to psychological manipulation because her mind never formed permanent traumatic memories. Sebastian's hands were shaking as he processed the information. They've been using my sister as a living laboratory for 15 years. And they've been using Hermione as her keeper, Heinrich added. The emotional bond between them wasn't natural. It was chemically induced to ensure Isabella's cooperation. But as they reached the medical bay doors, Hermione stopped dead in her tracks. No, she said firmly. Whatever they did to create the bond, what I feel for Luna, for Isabella, is real. She's not just Sebastian's sister. She's been my world for 6 months. Sebastian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he'd forgotten he was capable of feeling. Hermione wasn't just protecting Isabella out of conditioning or obligation. She was protecting her out of love. The assault team isn't here to eliminate witnesses, Sebastian realized suddenly. They're here to reclaim their most valuable test subject. Dr. Stone's voice came through the intercom again, more urgent now. Sebastian, there's something else. The baby's vitals are spiking. It's like her body is trying to remember how to age normally, but something is fighting it. Heinrich's face went pale. The booster shots. They give her booster shots every 72 hours to maintain the regression. If she's been away from their facility for longer than that, she could die. Hermione finished, horror washing over her features. Her body might try to age 15 years in a matter of hours. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor, closer now and more organized. But Sebastian wasn't thinking about the assault team anymore. He was thinking about the impossible choice that lay before them. Save Isabella by surrendering to Beaumont Industries, or watch his sister die as her body fought against 15 years of chemical manipulation. There's a third option, Heinrich said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. The antidote. Sebastian's head snapped up. What antidote? Your father was working on it before he died. A compound that could reverse the memory suppression and allow normal aging to resume. I've been secretly continuing his research for 15 years. Heinrich pulled a small vial from his jacket pocket. I finally synthesized a stable version last month. Hermione stared at the vial in disbelief. You've had a cure this entire time, and you didn't. I needed to be certain it would work, Heinrich interrupted. And I needed Isabella to be in a safe environment when we administered it. The transformation process is intense. Sebastian reached for the vial, his fingers trembling. What aren't you telling us? Heinrich's eyes filled with tears. The antidote will save her life and restore her natural aging. But it will also restore all of her suppressed memories. 15 years of trauma, of experimentation, of being aware but unable to resist. She'll remember everything they did to her. The weight of the decision settled over them like a shroud. Save Isabella's life, but condemn her to carry the full weight of her torture, or let her die as the innocent child she appeared to be. We don't get to make that choice for her, Hermione said firmly. She deserves the chance to live, to grow up, to become whoever she's meant to be, even if it hurts. Sebastian looked at the woman who had spent 6 months protecting his sister without even knowing who she was, and felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for 15 years, finally beginning to thaw. Together, he said, extending his hand to her. We do this together. As their fingers intertwined around the vial, the medical bay doors exploded inward. But instead of Beaumont's assault team, it was Dr. Stone, carrying Isabella in her arms, her face white with panic. They're not trying to get in, she gasped. They're trying to get us out. The entire mansion is rigged with explosives. We have 3 minutes before. The world exploded into chaos, but through it all, Sebastian held tight to Hermione's hand and the vial that might save his sister's life. Because sometimes the only way to save the people you love is to risk losing everything else. I'm literally speechless. Luna is Sebastian's sister, and Heinrich has been protecting them all along. Plus there's a cure, but it comes with the worst possible cost. This story just keeps getting more intense. What do you think they should do? Save Isabella and let her remember the trauma, or let her die peacefully? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're about to head into the darkest part of this incredible journey. The explosion that rocked the mansion's foundation sent Sebastian and Hermione crashing into the medical bay wall, the precious vial flying from their joined hands and shattering against the floor in a cascade of sparkling liquid and broken glass. No! Hermione screamed, dropping to her knees as she desperately tried to salvage what remained of Isabella's only hope. But the antidote was gone, soaking uselessly into the expensive Persian rug that was now stained with 15 years of research. Dr. Stone struggled to maintain her footing while keeping Isabella secure in her arms. The baby's breathing had become labored, her tiny chest rising and falling in an erratic pattern that made Emma's medical training scream warnings. Her body temperature is spiking, she called out over the sound of groaning metal and settling debris. Whatever those booster shots were doing, stopping them is killing her faster than we anticipated. Sebastian was on his feet, his mind racing through calculations of time and distance and impossible odds. Through the shattered windows, he could see the assault team's vehicles repositioning, not retreating, but forming a perimeter. They weren't trying to rescue Isabella anymore. They were making sure no one escaped alive. The explosives are on a timer, Heinrich called out, his elderly frame bent over a security console that was sparkling with damaged electronics. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. They're going to bring down the entire structure. Can you disarm them? Sebastian demanded. Heinrich's face was grim. The detonation signals are coming from outside the property. I need to access their command vehicle to stop the countdown. Hermione looked up from the ruined antidote, her face streaked with tears and determination. Then we get to their command vehicle. Hermione, no. Sebastian was beside her in an instant, pulling her to her feet. It's suicide. There are at least 12 operatives out there, all of them trained killers. We need to evacuate, get to the panic room, and watch Isabella die. Hermione's voice cut through his protests like a blade. Watch your sister suffocate in your arms, because we chose to hide instead of fight. Dr. Stone's voice carried a devastating finality. Even if we could synthesize another dose of the antidote, it would take hours, maybe days. Isabella doesn't have that long. The building shuddered again as another small explosion echoed from somewhere in the upper floors, a reminder that their time was running out faster than Isabella's failing heartbeat. There's another option, Heinrich said quietly, his voice barely audible over the chaos. But it requires a sacrifice that, whatever it is, we'll do it, Sebastian said without hesitation. Heinrich's eyes filled with an emotion that looked suspiciously like pride. The original research facility where your father worked is still operational, hidden beneath the Beaumont Industries headquarters downtown. They would have backup supplies of the antidote there. That's 20 minutes away, Hermione said desperately. Even if we could get past the assault team, even if we could reach the facility. I know a way, Heinrich interrupted, but it means splitting up. Sebastian goes for the antidote. You and Dr. Stone get Isabella to safety. Sebastian's entire body rejected the idea before Heinrich had finished speaking. No, we stay together. I'm not losing either of them again. You don't have a choice, Heinrich said with the gentle firmness of someone who had raised Sebastian from childhood. The tunnel system beneath the mansion connects to the old subway line. It's a direct route to downtown, but it can only accommodate one person at a time. And Sebastian, he paused, his voice heavy with implications. The facility's security system will only respond to Worthington family biometrics. It has to be you. Dr. Stone looked up from Isabella, her face grave. There's something else. The baby's condition is deteriorating faster than I initially calculated. If we don't get her that antidote within the next 40 minutes, the cellular damage will be irreversible. The math was brutal and simple. Sebastian could reach the facility, retrieve the antidote, and return in 35 minutes if everything went perfectly. But everything had stopped going perfectly the moment they discovered Heinrich's connection to Beaumont Industries. How do we know this isn't another trap? Hermione asked, voicing the suspicion that was clawing at Sebastian's mind. How do we know you're not leading him into an ambush? Heinrich met her gaze steadily. Because 15 years ago, I made a promise to Sebastian's father that I would protect his children. All of his children. I failed once. I won't fail again. Another explosion, closer this time, sent medical equipment crashing to the floor. Isabella's weak cry pierced through the noise, a sound so fragile it seemed to break something fundamental in both Sebastian and Hermione. I won't leave you, Sebastian said to Hermione, his voice rough with emotion. Not again. Not after I just found you. Hermione cupped his face in her hands, and despite the chaos surrounding them, her touch steadied him in a way nothing else could. You're not leaving me, she said softly. You're saving your sister. You're finishing what your father started. And when you come back, her voice cracked slightly. When you come back, we're going to have a real conversation about what happens next. The promise hung between them like a lifeline in a storm. But promises, Sebastian had learned, were fragile things that could be shattered by circumstances beyond anyone's control. Dr. Stone stood abruptly, Isabella secured in a specialized carrier against her chest. If we're doing this, we need to move now. The baby's vitals are becoming critical. Heinrich activated a hidden panel in the medical bay's floor, revealing a narrow tunnel that disappeared into darkness. The passage splits after 50 meters. Left leads to the surface 3 blocks away. That's your evacuation route. Right leads to the old subway system in downtown. Sebastian knelt beside the tunnel entrance, then turned to look at Hermione one last time. In her eyes, he saw the same desperate hope he felt, the fragile belief that maybe, against all odds, they could save Isabella and save each other. 40 minutes, he said, memorizing every detail of her face. 40 minutes, she confirmed. But as Sebastian disappeared into the tunnel and Hermione prepared to follow Dr. Stone toward what they hoped was safety, neither of them saw Heinrich's hand hesitate over the tunnel controls. Neither of them saw the small device he attached to the tunnel wall, a device that would seal the passage permanently 30 seconds after Sebastian passed the midway point. Neither of them realized that Heinrich's promise to protect Sebastian's children came with a terrible price, ensuring that Sebastian could never return to face the consequences of what he was about to discover at the Beaumont facility. Because sometimes protection meant making choices that would break the very hearts you were trying to save. The tunnel sealed with a finality that echoed through the darkness, cutting Sebastian off from the only two people in the world who mattered to him. Above ground, Hermione heard the sound and understood immediately what Heinrich had done. "You bastard," she whispered, but her words were lost in the sound of the mansion's final death throes. Isabella's breathing grew more labored in Dr. Stone's arms, and Sebastian, alone in the darkness, realized that Heinrich's plan had never been about reunion. It had been about sacrifice. I can't believe Heinrich just sealed Sebastian away from Hermione and Isabella. This is absolutely heartbreaking. Just when they found each other, they're torn apart again. And poor Isabella is running out of time. I'm honestly not sure how this is going to work out. What do you think Heinrich's real plan is? Let me know in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed because I have a feeling the next part is going to change everything. The tunnel system beneath Sebastian's mansion was older than he had realized, carved from the bedrock during Prohibition as a smuggling route, later converted by his father into an emergency escape system. But as Sebastian moved through the narrow passage, following the beam of his flashlight deeper into the earth, he began to notice details that didn't match Heinrich's story. Fresh air circulation, modern lighting systems that activated as he passed, communication cables running along the ceiling that looked like they'd been installed recently. This wasn't just an escape route. It was a sophisticated underground network that someone had been maintaining and upgrading for years. When Sebastian reached what Heinrich had described as a split in the tunnel, he found something else entirely, a fully operational command center carved into the rock, complete with multiple computer terminals, surveillance equipment, and a communications array that seemed to connect to every major building in the city. And sitting at the central console, very much alive and looking exactly as he had 15 years ago, was Sebastian's father. "Hello, son," David Worthington said quietly, turning in his chair with the calm demeanor of a man who had been waiting patiently for this moment. I suppose Heinrich finally decided it was time. Sebastian's weapon was in his hands before conscious thought kicked in, but his fingers were trembling too badly to maintain a steady aim. "You're dead. I watched them pull your body from the wreckage. I went to your funeral. You went to the funeral of a man who looked enough like me to fool a coroner who was being paid very well not to ask too many questions." David stood slowly, his hands visible and empty. "The fire was real, Sebastian. The threat to our family was real. But Heinrich and I realized that the only way to protect you and Isabella was to make Beaumont Industries believe they had succeeded in eliminating the threat." The flashlight fell from Sebastian's nerveless fingers, clattering against the stone floor. 15 years, he whispered. "I've spent 15 years believing I failed to save you. 15 years carrying the guilt. 15 years building the strength and resources we needed to finally take them down," David interrupted gently. "Do you think your business empire was built purely on talent and luck? Every contract, every merger, every strategic partnership was designed to position you exactly where you needed to be for this moment." Sebastian's legs gave out, and he found himself sitting heavily on a metal storage crate. "Isabella. They have Isabella, and she's dying." "Isabella is exactly where she needs to be," David said, moving to another console and pulling up what looked like real-time medical data. "Dr. Stone's readings are being transmitted directly to this facility. Your sister's condition is serious, but not critical yet. Not critical." Sebastian's voice rose with desperate anger. "Her body is trying to age 15 years in a matter of hours." Heinrich said what he needed to say to get you down here." David's fingers moved across the keyboard, bringing up files that made Sebastian's breath catch. The memory suppression drug was never permanent, Sebastian. The booster shots weren't keeping Isabella young. They were keeping her sedated. Her body has been trying to return to its natural age for months. The implications hit Sebastian like a physical blow. You mean she's not dying? She's healing. The process is traumatic and potentially dangerous, which is why we needed her under medical supervision, David confirmed. But yes, Isabella is finally becoming who she was always meant to be. Meanwhile, 3 stories above ground, Hermione was discovering her own devastating truth. The evacuation route Heinrich had directed them to wasn't leading away from the mansion. It was leading directly toward the Beaumont Industries command vehicle that Dr. Stone had identified on the perimeter. This is wrong, Hermione said, stopping abruptly in the underground parking garage where Heinrich had said they would find safety. We're walking into a trap. Dr. Stone looked around the empty concrete space, her medical bag clutched protectively against Isabella's carrier. Heinrich wouldn't. Heinrich has been lying to us from the beginning. Hermione interrupted, her mind racing through everything that had happened since they arrived at the mansion. Think about it. He knew exactly where I'd been living, exactly what I'd been doing, exactly when to expect the assault team. That level of surveillance doesn't happen by accident. Emma's face went pale as understanding dawned. He's been coordinating both sides. Not coordinating, Hermione corrected, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. Protecting. Heinrich has been playing Beaumont Industries against Sebastian for 15 years, keeping them focused on each other while. Her words were cut off by the sound of slow applause echoing through the garage. Very good, Miss Chase, a voice called out from the shadows. Though I must say, it's taken you longer to figure it out than I expected. A woman emerged from behind one of the concrete pillars, tall, elegant, with the kind of understated authority that spoke of real power. Hermione recognized her immediately from the photographs in Sebastian's files. Dr. Margaret Beaumont herself, the founder of the pharmaceutical empire that had destroyed so many lives. I was beginning to worry that the memory suppression had been more effective than we intended. Dr. Beaumont continued, moving closer with the confident stride of someone who believed she held all the cards. But it appears your cognitive functions have recovered admirably. Dr. Stone shifted protectively, moving Isabella's carrier behind her body. Stay back. We have nothing you want. On the contrary, Dr. Beaumont smiled, and the expression was genuinely warm, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. You have everything I want. My greatest success and my most persistent failure, delivered directly to my door. Hermione felt a cold clarity wash over her, stripping away 15 years of confusion and fear. Isabella isn't your success. She's your victim, and you're about to learn the difference. Am I? Dr. Beaumont pulled out what looked like a modified smartphone, its screen showing Isabella's vital signs in real time. Because according to my readings, the child is experiencing rapid cellular regeneration. In approximately 12 minutes, she'll complete her natural aging process and become a 15-year-old girl with perfect recall of everything that's been done to her. Emma's hands tightened protectively around Isabella. What are you saying? I'm saying that in 12 minutes, I'll have a test subject who can provide detailed feedback about 15 years of pharmaceutical research, Dr. Beaumont explained with scientific detachment. No more guesswork, no more trial and error. Just pure, unfiltered data about human consciousness, memory formation, and psychological resilience. The horror of it washed over Hermione like ice water. Isabella wouldn't just remember her trauma. She would become a living laboratory for it. You want feedback? Hermione stepped forward, and for the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt like herself. Not the broken, desperate girl who had begged for shelter, but someone with the strength to fight back. I can give you feedback. I remember what your drugs did to me. I remember the taste of terror and the weight of helplessness. I remember what it feels like to have your own mind turned against you. Dr. Beaumont's smile widened. Excellent. Though I should mention that your beloved Sebastian won't be joining us for this reunion. The tunnel system has been sealed permanently, and the Beaumont facility downtown has been experiencing some technical difficulties. But as she spoke, Hermione felt her phone vibrate with an incoming message. A message that shouldn't have been possible if Sebastian was truly trapped. The text was simple. Not all tunnels lead where you think they do. Trust Heinrich. Save my sister. I'm coming for you both. Hermione looked up at Dr. Beaumont with a smile that held 15 years of suppressed rage and newly discovered hope. "You want to know the difference between your greatest success and your most persistent failure?" she asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Enlighten me." Your greatest success was creating a child who could survive anything you did to her. Your most persistent failure was assuming that survival meant compliance. In her arms, Isabella let out a cry. Not the weak mewling of a dying infant, but the strong, clear voice of a child who was finally finding her way home. And somewhere in the darkness beneath the city, Sebastian was learning that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most impossible sacrifices. Oh my God, Sebastian's father is alive, and this has all been an elaborate 15-year plan. And Hermione is finally embracing her true strength. Plus, Isabella is actually healing, not dying. I'm getting chills just writing this. What do you think is going to happen when Sebastian and Hermione reunite? Drop your predictions in the comments and smash that subscribe button, because this climax is going to be absolutely epic. Dr. Beaumont's confident smile faltered as Isabella's cry echoed through the parking garage, not because of the sound itself, but because of what followed it. Every electronic device in a 50-foot radius began malfunctioning. Car alarms wailed, security cameras sparked and went dark, and Dr. Beaumont's modified smartphone screen filled with static before going completely black. "That's impossible," Dr. Beaumont whispered, staring at her dead device. "The electromagnetic dampening field shouldn't activate until she reaches full consciousness." A new voice interrupted from the garage entrance. Sebastian emerged from the shadows, but he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a man who should have been dead for 15 years, and beside him, Heinrich moved with the purposeful stride of someone who had finally stopped pretending to be frail. But it was the figure between them that made Dr. Beaumont take an involuntary step backward. Isabella, no longer an infant, but a 15-year-old girl with eyes that held the accumulated wisdom and pain of someone much older, stood on her own feet for the first time in over a decade. Her transformation had completed during the electromagnetic surge, and she was magnificent and terrible to behold. "Hello, Margaret," Isabella said, her voice carrying an authority that belonged to someone who had survived the impossible. "We need to talk." Dr. Stone nearly dropped her medical bag. "How is this possible? The cellular regeneration should have taken hours." "It did take hours," David Worthington explained, moving to stand protectively near his daughter. "Isabella has been aging gradually over the past 6 months, ever since Hermione's escape destabilized the chemical suppression system. Tonight was simply the final catalyst." Sebastian's eyes found Hermione's across the garage, and the relief and love in his expression nearly brought her to her knees. "Are you hurt?" he called out. "I'm fine," she called back, but her voice cracked with emotion. "Your sister is. She's incredible, Sebastian." Isabella turned toward Hermione with a smile that transformed her entire face. "Thank you," she said simply, "for keeping me safe when I couldn't keep myself safe. For choosing to love me even when you didn't know who I was." But Dr. Beaumont was far from finished. "Touching reunion aside," she said, pulling a small device from her coat, "you seem to have forgotten that I still control the infrastructure of this entire operation. One signal from this transmitter, and 43 children currently in Beaumont facilities around the world will receive lethal doses of the compounds that have kept them compliant." The words hit the group like a physical blow. 43 children. All of them victims like Hermione and Isabella. All of them pawns in a game they never chose to play. "You're bluffing," Heinrich said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Dr. Beaumont's finger hovered over the device. "Sebastian, your business empire is impressive, but it's built on legitimate channels. Legal channels. My operation exists in the shadows, in places where missing children don't get reported and desperate families don't ask questions. You can't fight shadows with corporate boardrooms." Sebastian took a step forward, his hands empty, but his eyes blazing with 15 years of suppressed fury. "You're right. I can't fight shadows with boardrooms." He looked at Isabella, who nodded with the solemn understanding of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire conscious life. "But I can fight them with light," Sebastian continued. "Isabella, Show her what 15 years of your research actually accomplished. Isabella closed her eyes, and the electromagnetic field around her expanded outward like ripples on a pond. But this wasn't the chaotic surge from moments before. This was controlled, purposeful, and devastating in its precision. Every device in Dr. Beaumont's network began receiving the same signal simultaneously. Not a signal to harm the children in her facilities, but something else entirely. Isabella's memories, transmitted directly through the electronic infrastructure that Beaumont Industries had spent decades building. "What did you do?" Dr. Beaumont gasped, staring at her transmitter as it began broadcasting something she couldn't control. "I gave them what you never could," Isabella said, her voice steady despite the obvious effort the transmission was costing her. "I gave them hope. Every child in your facilities is now receiving 15 years of my memories. Not the trauma and pain, but the knowledge that escape is possible, that survival is possible, that they are not alone." Across the world, in secret facilities on 4 continents, children who had been broken by years of pharmaceutical torture suddenly remembered that they were human beings with rights and voices and the capacity to fight back. "You've destroyed everything," Dr. Beaumont whispered, her face going pale as reports began flooding in through her remaining communication channels. Facility alarms, staff evacuations, local authorities receiving anonymous tips about child abuse operations. "We've liberated everything," David Worthington corrected. 43 children who will finally have the chance to go home. Families who will finally know what happened to their missing children. And a pharmaceutical empire that will finally face justice for 15 years of atrocities. But Dr. Beaumont wasn't finished. With the desperation of someone who had lost everything, she lunged toward Isabella with a syringe she had pulled from her coat. One final attempt to reclaim her greatest success. She never reached her target. Hermione intercepted her with the fluid grace of someone who had spent 6 months protecting the person she loved most in the world. The syringe went flying, shattering against the concrete wall, and Dr. Beaumont found herself on the ground with Hermione's knee against her chest and 15 years of suppressed rage looking down at her. "You want to know what your memory suppression drug really accomplished?" Hermione asked, her voice deadly quiet. "It created someone who remembers everything. Not just the trauma, but the strength it took to survive it. Not just the fear, but the love that conquered it. And not just the victim I was, but the protector I became." Sebastian was beside her in an instant, his hand covering hers. "Hermione." She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw the same question that had been haunting them both since that night 15 years ago. Could love really triumph over that much darkness? "Together," she asked, echoing his words from what felt like a lifetime ago. "Together," he confirmed, as sirens began wailing in the distance. FBI, local police, international authorities responding to the coordinated release of evidence that would bring down not just Beaumont Industries, but an entire network of pharmaceutical companies engaged in illegal human experimentation. Sebastian helped Hermione to her feet. Dr. Beaumont lay unconscious on the concrete, her empire crumbling around her, while 43 children around the world were taking their first free breaths in years. Isabella moved to stand between Sebastian and Hermione, looking up at the 2 people who had saved her life in different ways and at different times. "So," she said with the pragmatic wisdom of someone who had lived far too much life in far too short a time, "what happens now?" Sebastian looked at Hermione, the girl he had failed to save 15 years ago, the woman who had succeeded in saving his sister when he couldn't, the person who had somehow managed to love him despite everything that had been broken between them. "Now," he said, his voice rich with possibilities neither of them had dared to imagine, "we figure out how to be a family." Heinrich stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. "If I may, sir, I believe that process began the moment Miss Hermione knocked on our gates." Dr. Stone, who had been quietly documenting everything for the medical journals that would undoubtedly want to study Isabella's unprecedented recovery, smiled as she watched the 3 of them. 2 adults who had found each other across an impossible chasm of trauma and loss, and one remarkable young woman who had literally grown up in the space between heartbeats. As the authorities arrived to take Dr. Beaumont into custody and begin the massive investigation that would reshape the pharmaceutical industry, Sebastian pulled Hermione close, while Isabella leaned against them both. 40 minutes, Hermione whispered against Sebastian's chest, remembering his promise for what felt like an eternity ago. I'm never leaving you alone again, he whispered back, his arms tightening around both his sister and the woman who had become everything he had never known he needed. Isabella looked up at them both with eyes that held the wisdom of survival and the hope of new beginnings. Good, she said simply, because I have 15 years of birthdays to catch up on, and I'm going to need help planning the parties. For the first time in 15 years, the Worthington family was whole. And for the first time in her life, Hermione Chase, now Hermione Worthington, if she chose to be, knew what it felt like to truly come home. I'm literally crying happy tears right now. The way Isabella saved all those children, the way Hermione protected her, and the way Sebastian kept his promise. This is everything I hoped for and more. But we still have one more part to go, and I have a feeling it's going to be the perfect ending to this incredible journey. What do you think happens next for this beautiful family? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe because you're going to want to see how this amazing story concludes. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the renovated Worthington mansion, casting warm golden light across the breakfast table where 3 people sat sharing coffee, orange juice, and the kind of comfortable silence that only comes from genuine family love. Isabella, now fully adjusted to her 15-year-old body and mind, was bent over a college application essay, her pen moving with the determined focus of someone who had been given a second chance at education and refused to waste a moment of it. The nightmares had mostly stopped 3 months ago. Replaced by dreams of the future, she was finally free to imagine. Sebastian sat across from her, reading through reports from the Worthington Foundation, the organization he had established to help the 43 children who had been rescued from Beaumont facilities around the world. Every child had been reunited with their families or placed in loving homes, and each one received comprehensive medical care, therapy, and educational support. The foundation had become his life's work, transforming his business empire from a tool of personal success into an instrument of healing. And Hermione, no longer the desperate, frightened girl who had collapsed at their gates in a snowstorm, but a confident young woman who had found her place in the world, was curled up in the window seat with a book about child psychology. She had started college in the spring, determined to become a therapist who specialized in helping trauma survivors. Her own healing journey had shown her that sometimes the people who understood pain best were the ones most qualified to help others overcome it. The Martinez family wants to visit next weekend, Sebastian said, looking up from his tablet. Their daughter Sophia has been asking about Isabella specifically. Apparently, she credits Isabella's memory transmission with giving her the courage to speak up about her experiences. Isabella smiled without looking up from her essay. Tell them yes. Sophia's about my age now, right? Maybe we can finally have that normal teenage sleepover I never got to experience. The simple statement carried weight that would have been crushing 6 months ago. Now it felt like victory. Isabella had not only survived 15 years of pharmaceutical torture, she had transformed it into empathy, wisdom, and an unshakable determination to help other survivors reclaim their lives. Hermione set down her book and moved to stand behind Sebastian's chair, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. The gesture was natural now, unconscious, born from months of learning to trust that love didn't have to be desperate or painful to be real. Dr. Stone called this morning, she said, her fingers unconsciously tracing the faded scars on Sebastian's hands, reminders of the fire that had brought them together and torn them apart before ultimately leading them home to each other. The last of the Beaumont research facilities has been officially shut down. The Pharmaceutical Review Board has implemented new international oversight protocols, and Margaret Beaumont was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Sebastian leaned back into her touch, marveling as he did every day at how naturally they had learned to comfort each other. And the children from the overseas facilities, all placed in homes, all receiving the support they need. Hermione's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had spent months personally ensuring that every single child was safe, loved, and given the resources to heal. The last family reunion happened yesterday in Prague. The Novak twins were finally able to return to their parents after 7 years. Isabella finally looked up from her essay, her eyes bright with the kind of joy that came from knowing that their victory had rippled outward to touch lives around the world. Heinrich would have been so proud. The mention of Heinrich brought a moment of bittersweet silence. The elderly butler who had orchestrated their reunion and sacrificed his own safety to ensure their family's survival had passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 months ago. His final gift to them had been a letter explaining the full scope of his 15-year plan to bring down Beaumont Industries, a plan that had required him to deceive everyone he loved in order to protect them. He knew, Sebastian said quietly. Somehow, he knew that the only way to save us was to force us to save each other. Hermione moved around the table to sit beside him, her hand finding his with the ease of practice and the warmth of absolute trust. He knew that love was stronger than trauma, that family was stronger than fear, and that sometimes the most broken people are the ones best equipped to heal the world. Isabella stood and moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where she had spent the past months relearning what it meant to be a teenager. The view included the memorial garden they had planted for Heinrich, the playground equipment Sebastian had installed for visiting families, and the small cottage that served as a counseling center for trauma survivors. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice carrying the thoughtful weight of someone who had learned to choose her words carefully, "about what I want to study in college." Sebastian and Hermione waited, knowing that Isabella's decisions about her future were sacred things that deserved space and respect. "I want to study neuroscience," Isabella continued. "Specifically, memory recovery and trauma processing. If I'm going to carry these experiences for the rest of my life, I want to use them to help other people reclaim theirs." The pride that filled Sebastian's chest was so overwhelming, he had to clear his throat before speaking. "You know that means more years of studying the very techniques that were used against you." "I know," Isabella said, turning back to face them with a smile that transformed her entire face. "But I also know that the best way to take power away from trauma is to understand it completely. They use science to hurt us. I want to use science to heal us." Hermione stood and moved to embrace Isabella, and Sebastian joined them, wrapping his arms around both of the remarkable women who had become his anchor in a world that finally made sense. As they stood together in the morning sunlight, surrounded by the evidence of their healing and the promise of their future, Sebastian marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A desperate girl in a snowstorm had knocked on his gates 6 months ago, and in saving her, he had discovered that he himself had been the one who needed rescuing. "So," Hermione said, pulling back slightly to look at both Sebastian and Isabella with eyes that sparkled with mischief and love, "what do you say we start planning Isabella's 16th birthday party? I'm thinking we invite all the families from the foundation. Make it a real celebration of survival and new beginnings." Isabella's face lit up with a kind of pure happiness that had once seemed impossible. "Can we have a chocolate cake? A really big one." "The biggest chocolate cake in the history of birthday parties," Sebastian promised, and meant it with every fiber of his being. As the three of them began planning a celebration that would have been unimaginable 6 months ago, the morning sun continued to stream through the windows of their home. A home that had been built on the foundation of trauma, but had become a sanctuary of love, healing, and hope. Outside, spring was blooming in the memorial garden, new life growing from ground that had once known only sorrow. And inside, a family that had been scattered by cruelty and loss had finally found their way back to each other, proving that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings emerge from the darkest endings. The girl who had begged for shelter in a snowstorm had found not just a home, but a purpose. The man who had carried 15 years of guilt had discovered that redemption was possible. And the child who had been stolen and broken had grown into a young woman determined to heal the world. Together, they were proof that love could triumph over anything, even the worst that humanity had to offer. And their story was just beginning. What an absolutely incredible journey this has been. From that heartbreaking moment in the snowstorm to this beautiful family celebrating life and love together. I'm honestly emotional just thinking about how far they've all come. Sebastian, Hermione, and Isabella prove that even the darkest trauma can be transformed into the brightest hope when people choose to love and protect each other. Thank you so much for joining me on this amazing adventure. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please leave a comment telling me your favorite moment. I genuinely read every single one, and they mean the world to me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, Now is the perfect time because I have so many more incredible stories like this one coming your way. Until next time, remember that no matter how dark the storm, love always finds a way to bring us home.